Hello. Today we're going to take a trip up to a place called McGill, Nevada, just a little bit north of Ely, some 300 miles north of where I live here in Las Vegas. McGill started out as a company town built by a mining operation in the early 1900s. They built a big processing plant and smelter there to primarily process the ores that were coming out of a copper mine in Ruth, which is just west of Ely. Got quite an interesting history there. We're going to go check it out. I got my travel coffee and we're going to go up there today and look at things over. I've been up there a couple of times earlier this year. Once to concentrate on the city of Ely stuff and the other to concentrate on the Nevada Northern Railway. So come along with me. Let's go check out McGill, Nevada. Before McGill developed as a smelter town, it was the location of a ranch started by John Cowger in 1872. In 1886, William Neal McGill acquired full control of the ranch, and along with former Nevada Governor Jewett Adams, began one of the largest livestock operations in the state. Their strong partnership continued into the 20th century until Adams died in June of 1920, followed by McGill in April 1923. On November 17, 1904, the Boston and Nevada Copper Company merged with the White Pine Copper Company, forming the Nevada Consolidated Copper Company. The Nevada Consolidated Copper Company had numerous mines in the region and was seeking a partner to create a smelter in the area. The Cumberland and Ely Mining Corporation had acquired 8 square miles of land near this ranch and thought it would be ideal for a smelter location due to the access to plentiful water sources. The two companies formed a partnership, the Steptoe Valley Smelting and Mining Company. In 1906, a 9-mile pipeline was built bringing water from Duck Creek to reservoirs near the smelter site. Pipeline construction began September 25, 1906. The pipeline was an interesting construction, which, when completed, consisted of 7 miles of wood staves bound by iron bands and 2 miles of steel riveted pipe. A system of 5 reservoirs was constructed in Duck Creek Valley. By 1910, these reservoirs had a storage capacity of 260 million gallons. The first water was sent through the line on December 25, 1907, approximately 1 year and 3 months after construction began. While the pipeline was being constructed, foundations were set for the smelter buildings and the mill. The smelter was completed and operations began on May 15, 1908. The first copper was shipped from the smelter on August 7 of 1908. The town was briefly known as Smelter before being renamed McGill after the ranch. McGill became a company town starting in 1906 when the Nevada Consolidated Copper Company built a reduction mill and smelter here to process ores from the Ely copper mines. The site was chosen both for its access to water and for the large tract of flat land where tailings ponds could be built. When the McGill reduction facilities began operation in 1908, they were processing 8,000 tons of ore a day. By World War I, production increased to 14,000 tons per day. On July 9 of 1922, the mill at McGill burned, resulting in a loss over $2 million, equating to about $37.4 million in today's dollars. Production resumed in the reconstructed mill at McGill at 3 p.m. on Saturday, September 4, 1922, just 68 days after a large portion of the mill had been destroyed by fire. By 1930, McGill had over 3,000 residents, roughly half of which worked at the reduction plants. The population of the town grew from its inception to 1,904 in 1910 and 2,864 in 1920. Kennecott, Utah Copper acquired Nevada Consolidated Copper Company, which included the Steptoe Valley Smelting and Mining Company and the smelter at McGill in 1932. Up until the 1950s, McGill was a company town owned by Kennecott. In the 1950s, Kennecott started selling McGill's homes and businesses to individuals. In 1983, the price of copper, along with low-grade ore being mined, led to Kennecott closing the smelter and demolishing it. With the primary employer gone, the population of McGill decreased to its current level, somewhere around 1,000 people. Ever since full-scale operation started in 1908, most of the tonnage handled over the railroad has been copper ore bound from the Eureka Liberty pit at Copper Flat to the concentrator at McGill. In the early days, steam shovels loaded the ore directly into gondolas, which were then assembled into trains for the winding 11-mile climb up and around the sides of the pit. Eight trains a day from Copper Flat to the concentrator at McGill makes up the normal operations for the line during the 1920s, and have fed the McGill plant with some 300 to 350 carloads. To handle this traffic, Kennecott maintained a fleet of over 600 ore cars. On January 29, 1967, after 60 years of operation, Kennecott shut down operations at their Liberty pit. To make up the difference in production, operations were to be resumed at the adjacent Tripp and Veteran mines. Kennecott closed the mines in 1978, and all the ore trains to McGill stopped. However, there was a newspaper article written in the Pacific News that was dated in March of 1979. It stated that Kennecott Copper's smelter at McGill and the facilities at East Ely, Nevada, have been idle since early 1978 due to pollution control restrictions placed on the firm by the federal government. At this time, Kennecott reportedly is repairing and upgrading the affected facilities and could have them back in operation by the end of May. At that time, Kennecott's subsidiary, Nevada Northern Railway, would begin hauling concentrates into the smelter from Utah. On July 15, 1983, the McGill smelter was shut down indefinitely due to the smelter not being able to secure sufficient supplies of copper concentrates to keep the smelter in operation. During 1989 through 1993, the facilities at McGill were demolished and the site was reclaimed, including approximately 4,000 acres of tailing surface. On June 20 and 21, 1983, the last Nevada Northern Railway freight operated from East Ely to Cobre and returned. Nevada Northern ceased operations. Let's take a look at the development of the housing situation in McGill. When construction began on the smelter in 1906, a string of temporary buildings plus office building, warehouses, and boarding houses were soon erected by the company. In 1907, 2 general merchandise stores, a hotel, and a saloon were added to the new town. And in the same year, the Steptoe Valley Smelting and Milling Company completed 50 concrete houses for certain skilled employees and their families, and a number of very substantial residences for company officials, collectively soon came to be known as the Circle. The half-tent houses, which were used at first to house from 4 to 6 employees, and later for families awaiting construction of more permanent houses, were not very adequate in a climate where temperatures often drop below zero. These houses, equipped with pot-bellied stove and with outside water taps and outside toilets, were long and bitterly remembered by those housewives who were unfortunate enough to reach McGill during that transition. The concrete houses, as well as later wooden ones on the other hand, were well constructed and furnished from the beginning with running water. The decision of the company officials to build substantial dwellings for their employees and to control the type of business establishments allowed in the community ensured an orderly development without the usual overcrowding and unsanitary conditions, which were so much part of a normal boom mining town. Company policy, which limited gambling and the sale of hard liquor to certain establishments, set up a situation at McGill where there was only one saloon, and it was called the Copper Club. A company town, no matter what might have been the wishes of its citizens, had no local government of its own. The company owned the land on which the town was built and thus controlled the community pretty much as the company officials desired. Private businesses in the community began their operations only upon approval of company officials. The company, by its control, allowed only a certain number of each type of business in the community, and thus if an operator was fortunate enough to acquire a lease, he could be assured of a rather lucrative and stable trade. McGill remained a company town until the 1950s, and one of its initial acts to divest itself of such was the sale of the McGill Dairy. It sold its interest on April 1 in 1951 to the White River Dairymen's Association. On July 1 in 1955, the McGill Commissary closed its doors after over 30 years of operations. The company now was out of the dairy business and the store businesses. Rumors began to circulate throughout the district that the company soon would be out of the housing business also. Then officials announced that Kennecott had sold its community town sites in December 15, 1955. Let's take a drive down the main street of McGill and contrast today with the past. This is a photo of downtown McGill sometime in the 1920s. It shows the Brunswick Pool Hall, which was the second hall in McGill. It was managed by Jack Long. Looking further down, the unnamed building on the left is now called Marie's Cafe. The McGill Laundry building has since been demolished and replaced with the McGill Theater. The McGill Theater was originally constructed in the 1920s and it closed in the late 1960s. Today, the new marquee sign has been replaced in August of 2022. This large building right here was originally built in 1926. It also had an apartment upstairs, and at one time it was a Nash car dealership, and its last occupant was a store that was just called the Standard Market. This is a view of McGill's Main Street. Looks sometime in the early 1960s. You can see the Cypress Hall and the post office building, and this is what it looks like today. Cypress Hall was originally built in 1924. This is a view of McGill's Main Street looking south on the east side of the roadway. This photo looks like it's from the 1940s. The McGill Candy Shop building is no longer there. However, the McGill Cafe is still there today, but the building is vacant. The history of the McGill drugstore began somewhere around 1908, when the Nevada Consolidated Copper Company started building homes in the area. Approximately the same time, the Steptoe Drug Company built this drugstore. On December 31st, 1915, the store was acquired by 3 investors and incorporated as the McGill Drug Company. It changed hands many times but remained incorporated as the McGill Drug Company until its final closure in 1979. In the late 1930s, Gerald Jerry Colbert became the pharmacist. In 1954, he became a partner in the store. By the mid-1950s, Gerald and Elsa, his wife, had become sole owners of the business. In 1979, when Gerald passed away, Elsa closed the pharmacy but kept a portion of the store open sporadically for a few years. On November 3, 1995, the Colbert's son Michael, Stephen, and Danny gave the drugstore and its inventory to the White Pine Public Museum for historical preservation and display. The Copper Club was the first and only saloon in McGill. It was established in 1907 and went out of existence with the coming of Prohibition. The post office of McGill moved into the building shortly after the Copper Club closed. Originally known as the YMCA building, and now referred to as McGill Club, grading began on September 15 of 1910. The clubhouse was opened up on June 29 of 1911. The building housed a gymnasium, reading room, bowling alley, shower baths, and in the basement was a pool. I've really been unable to find a lot of history about the public schools in McGill, Nevada. The school building shown on the left was built prior to the 1930s. That building was demolished sometime in the 1940s. The school building on the right was built sometime in the 1930s. That building still stands today, but it appears that it's vacant. A real sense of pride for the community of McGill is its baseball park. The park was constructed by Nevada Consolidated Copper Company in the early 1900s to provide its employees with a place of recreational activities. The property was then owned by the Kennecott Mining Company. In 1961, ownership was transferred to the White Pine County School District. The Nevada Northern Railway built the McGill Depot in 1910. It was to serve as a passenger and freight depot. In 1941, passenger service ended. During this time of operation, it provided several daily trains for workers, shoppers, and school children between McGill and nearby Ely. With the assistance from the State's Commission of Cultural Affairs, a grant program, the Nevada Northern Railway Museum has completed partial restoration work on the depot in anticipation of its future use as an interpretive center for the Nevada's railroad history. These next few photos are some random shots of the buildings that I could see from fenced-off areas on the Kennecott site itself. Hey, thanks for watching my video presentation of McGill, Nevada. As I had mentioned earlier in the video itself, started out as a ranching area in the 1860s, 1870s. And then later on during the mining industry, it became a major location for a mill and smelter plant in the early 1900s. As I understand, the population grew up to be almost 3,000 people at one time. But the plant shut down permanently in 1983, and the town has struggled all along. I think the last two census in 2010 and 2020 showed that there was right around 1,000 people that lived there. There's a little small business community there. The houses around there seem to be really nice and neatly maintained and whatnot. But I found the area very interesting and the history very interesting, and that's why I proceeded forward to build and develop a presentation about it. But I appreciate you guys watching. And thanks again. Even until next time, I'll see you guys.